Now, I don't think I've been around for a time where there has been more drama in the sport of bowling than there is right now, but the Cold War for bowling is way deeper than how soft your bowling balls are. Let's get into it. What is up, you guys? Welcome to 10 Pin Life. My name is Ben, and in this video we're going to go over the 3 things that I think are contributing to what I'm calling the Cold War of bowling. Whether you're new to the channel or you've seen every video I've done for the last few months, please be sure to make your subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with your friends. Also, check out this Collar House t-shirt. It's pretty sweet. So in my conversation with Jason Belmonte, which I'll link up here for you, he characterized the state of bowling better than I could have ever even imagined. Imagining the sport or the game, or however you want to refer to it, as a boulder. And there's all these people surrounding this boulder. We all want to push it. We want to get it to move. We want to get it to go in a positive direction. Based on our perspective, we think that this direction is the right way. And the person on the other side of the rock thinks the absolute opposing direction of what that person is applying pressure to is the right way. They're both seeing things forward, but they're opposing each other so much that they're not making any progress in either direction. And this is happening across the entire boulder on all different ways in which this boulder could move. We're all equally opposing each other and just stymied in one single position. This stalemate between entities, which includes bowling ball companies, and it includes proprietors, and it includes bowlers, and it includes the people who make lane panels and lane oil, and all of the people that put so much time and effort and love into this game, are stuck in a cold war. We're all staring at each other, waiting for the other one to balk, waiting for somebody to give an inch, because financial limitations that have made themselves very much a reality in this sport have pushed us in a direction where we have to do everything that we can to scrap together the revenue that we can to keep surviving as an individual entity and losing our focus on the sport as a whole. That is the bowling Cold War. And I believe that there are 3 really big primary contributors to this Cold War that if we can resolve these issues, and I'm not necessarily saying that I know how, but if we can resolve these issues, if we can work together, if we can come together, we can problem solve our way through this, that boulder starts to move. And it moves in a direction. Maybe it's the wrong direction and we figure out like we don't want to go that way. But at the very least, we figured out that the boulder can move. We can get the sport of bowling headed in a direction that's maybe positive, but at the very least it's moving. And now we know that it can change, it can move, and it can shift, and we can do different things to make the sport better. We can work together, we can collaborate, we can figure this thing out rather than just staring at each other and thinking about how we're going to capitalize on somebody else's mistakes within our own industry. But before we get fired up, I want you to scroll down to the comment section and tell me what you think the leading contributing factor to a lack of growth in the sport of bowling is. Scroll down now, type it in, and I want to know what it is, because if we align on it, maybe we can work together, we can problem solve this together. And you know what? If you know something that I don't, that means I'm getting better, and that's what we want to do. So these aren't in any particular order, but number 1, the pace of evolution among the 3 entities that are in the sport of bowling, which is bowlers, manufacturers, and the governing bodies. The paces of their evolutions are so different that we're not able to even see a same reality when considering what we can do different together. Manufacturers, and that means people that make lanes, people that make lane oil, people that make pin setters, people that make bowling balls, people that produce accessories, shoes, all this stuff. They are all pushing as hard as they can to gain a competitive edge to sell those products to bowlers so that they strike more, they score better, and ultimately yield better results. That's capitalism. That's just the way that product manufacturing is going to go. They're going to push limits. They're going to do stuff to try and get ahead of their competition. But that push is so fast. Look at what has happened in the last 10 years within bowling balls, within lane panels. Like, there's so much of it that has changed And then you take a look at the other two entities of governing bodies and bowlers. Are they really able to keep up with that pace of evolution in understanding what it actually means and how it matters to their game and the game of their friends and their leagues and their tournaments and just everything? Are bowlers able to understand that? And then are the governing bodies, PBA, USBC, are they able to create a set of rules that is fair and consistent and is able to actually govern these products that are pushing the envelope? Because they have to push the envelope by nature of the business that they're in. The manufacturers have to try and push as hard forward as they can, whereas a governing body's job is to pull the reins back. For example, everything that's going on with Storm and USBC comes down to this. Storm pushed the envelope. USBC finally pulled the reins back. Now, I'm sure it is far more nuanced than that with information that I don't have. I think Storm was right on the cutting edge of something, and USBC, as a governing body, didn't quite have the rules to keep up with it. They didn't quite have the processes to keep up with it, and maybe I'm wrong. But ultimately, at some point, the governing body caught up with that pace of evolution. Like, hey, whoa, hold on. Too far. Too far. It's the pace of evolution that created such turmoil, and now bowlers are getting thrown in the middle of it, saying essentially pick a side. Both sides can be equally right and equally wrong. This pace of evolution is ultimately the source of this problem. And the same goes for those that run the sport. The community of bowlers tends to be really slow evolving. You know, it's definitely a blue-collar sport nowadays. You've got a lot of people that in the technology world would be considered laggards. Proprietors tend to be a little bit slower to pick up on the evolution as well. The pace of evolution between bowlers and those that actually run the sport is different. The pace of evolution between bowlers and understanding ball technology is massive. The pace of evolution within the bowling community as bowlers, in a general sense, is really, really slow. So anytime that there's change, whether it's in rules, whether it's in equipment or whatever, bowlers are the last people to pick it up just because of, well, it's bowling. They have other stuff to do generally. It's the largest recreational sport in the world. Professionals are right on the cutting edge. They're not missing it, but that's 2% of all bowlers in the whole world. So if we can figure out a way to educate people enough to understand the evolution that's happening in the sport, or at least give them the opportunity to do so, say, hey, things are changing, and this is how, and this is why it matters to you, it at least makes the acceptance of this change easier. Transparency within what is actually happening makes the acceptance of change easier to adapt to, easier to accept into my sport of bowling, and bring it into my world. Because if you're just going to leave me in the dark as a bowler and you're just running out ahead, I'm just going to get frustrated, and honestly, I might leave. And that leads me to point number 2. Bowling used to be the easiest sport to get into. It was a very simple game, and it can be a very simple game, but the barrier to entry from entry level to competitive, that hill is massive. Now, when I say it's massive, what do I mean? Well, there's 3 big categories within this barrier to entry into competitive bowling that really get in our way. First off, one of the biggest barriers to getting into competitive level bowling is the amount of knowledge that you need to be successful. It sucks showing up to tournaments or even just maybe more difficult leagues or whatever and not having a damn clue what is happening when lanes start to transition, or your ball doesn't do the same thing that you expect it to, or your spare ball hooks in the fronts and you're just like, crap, I'm missing everything left. That process is not fun. Most people bail at that point. When pros talk about you have to go out on tour and cut your teeth, and the only way to really learn how to be a professional bowler is to be a professional bowler, that's what they're talking about. Is if you have the grit to grind yourself through that to get to that high level, well, it's pretty impressive because it's freaking hard. But I'm not talking about professional level. I just want competitive level bowling to be more accessible, because right now, from a knowledge perspective, it's so hard to come by. But the second one is purely accessibility, especially as it relates to expense. I will give Brian Voss a whole lot of credit on this one. He made me consider this point quite a bit. It is so hard to compete at a competitive level with a limited arsenal. It used to be show up with a couple balls, show up with 2 or 3. Now it's you got to show up with 2 or 3 bags. The fact that you kind of need to throw a couple $1,000s at it to really have a chance to truly compete, that's a big barrier to entry, again, in a more blue-collar sport, one that at the recreational level can be very inexpensive, but at the competitive level, it's just a huge jump. And that barrier, to me, is one that keeps so many people from bowling tournaments, from going and bowling in different houses and doing different things in the sport, because they don't want to show up and be clueless or lost or just plain suck because they don't have the 12 balls that the other guy has. If we can be creative and find a way to bridge this gap between recreational and competitive bowling, and maybe find some middle ground, or just give our more entry level or just really interested bowlers the opportunity to compete in a landscape where they don't have to sink a bunch of money into it to have a chance, I think is a huge positive way to get more people more interested in deeper levels of bowling. But I said there was 3, and this is one that's maybe a little bit tougher for me to talk about, but the third barrier to entry as it relates to competitive level bowling is culture. The nature of how localized our bowling communities are. I can't tell you how many dirty, weird, and bad looks I've gotten from complete strangers who had no idea who I was, and I just showed up to compete in the thing that they're going to compete in. Now, I'm not saying that this happens every time and it's something that's so overtly negative that I can't get over it. However, when I first started bowling tournaments, it really turned me off for a while, because it's like, why do I want to go somewhere where I'm not welcomed, or people don't want me there, and I have to like earn my place? And maybe that earning of my place is something that might be small in the grand scheme of things, but that's such a huge deterrent. And when that doesn't exist, when there isn't that negative culture, it draws people in more than you can even imagine. That was how I met one of my best friends. That's how I met my doubles partner. So many great people in a tournament series that I was a complete stranger to, and they welcomed me in with open arms, and I'm so grateful for that opportunity. But that is not the norm. Bowlers need to recognize that we are a community of bowlers. When somebody shows up to bowl, we have to welcome them. Now, if they are a bag and they completely burn that bridge before you even have the chance to, that's fine, but that's a personal thing. We have to give everybody a chance. That's just going to put those hooks in a little bit deeper. It's going to keep people in this sport longer, and it's going to keep us more interested. It's going to get more money moving around for tournaments and that sort of stuff too. The culture improves if we make it that way. So the first one, pace of evolution being completely different among these entities. The second one is that pace of evolution creating these massive barriers to entry to getting into the competitive level of bowling. But I said that there was 3, and this is one that I referenced in my conversation with Matt Farber on the 10 Pin Life podcast, and I don't see anybody owning the responsibility to grow the sport of bowling. Now, we have the BPAA, we have in Wisconsin BCAW, we have the USBC, we have the PBA, we have a lot of these entities, we have manufacturers, we have proprietors, we have all of these entities. And from my perspective, it really feels like they're all looking at each other, waiting for somebody else to be responsible to own the growth of the sport. In my analysis of why I think that USBC should bring back revealing the oil patterns and the live streams for the Open Championships, I was wrong. I said that it is USBC's primary responsibility to grow the sport of bowling. That is not listed anywhere in their vision, in their mission. I'm not saying that they're directly detracting from growing the sport of bowling, but their goal is to govern the sport, not grow it. And I get that. They're a governing body. And I could go through all of these different entities and tell you why they might be able to make an excuse about why growing the sport as a whole is not their job. And because of that fact, because there isn't like this individual, like one person, one entity that is truly accountable to growing the sport, no one's taking a hold of it. Somebody has to own this thing. So why don't we all just own the fact that we need to look at growth, not just within whatever entity we exist. If we can shift that focus and focus on growing the sport, saying, you know what, and Belmo put this great, if there's something great happening in the center that's down the street that I think bowlers are going to like and I'm a proprietor, point them that way. Give them the opportunity to have a story that they can tell that happened in a bowling center. Because that's really the glue that keeps us in this game. It's the people, it's the connections, it's the fact that we can be so together and do something that we all love. And rather than focusing on how you can keep that one person in your center or keep that one person focused on your tournament or whatever, encourage people to be a part of the bowling community. It's individual choices to choose to own the responsibility to grow this sport. And I do want to make this pretty clear. Ownership doesn't mean that things go your way. Ownership just means that we have the opportunity to collaborate, because now the problem is ours. And if you have somebody else that also owns the problem, work with them. Have a conversation about how this problem exists over here, and you have a solution and they have a solution, and maybe we compromise. Maybe we make a third solution that's better. Maybe we just decide that that other person's solution is better than our own because they had a different perspective that was more effective for the solution moving forward. Have the conversation. We can't just assume that our perspective is the right one, because what happens is we go right back to where we started this conversation. There's one boulder, and if we only look at it from our perspective, we're going to take that person who really, really wants to push the sport forward, and we're going to put them on the exact opposite side of this boulder. And we're going to push and push and push to the point that we just go nowhere. We didn't align ourselves to take this boulder and say, you know what? Let's go that way. If we can do that, there's no problems that we can't solve. I'm not going to say that there won't be any problems, because there absolutely will. That's life. But if we can accept the responsibility that it is all of our responsibilities to grow the sport as bowlers, as governing bodies, as manufacturers, as individual proprietors or corporations, or everybody that is associated with the sport. If we can accept the fact that it's on us to grow it, and accept the fact that we, because of that, have to work together, to collaborate, to communicate, and to ultimately set a plan and push this thing forward, there's nothing we can't do. So let's solve the Cold War in bowling. Let's start to work together. I want to know what all of your ideas are. I really want to know how you think the sport of bowling improves. Give me some solutions. Let's get some ideas rolling. Comment on somebody else's. What can we do today, tomorrow, this week, this month to make our sport better? Let me know in the comments. But that's going to be it for this one, you guys. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you haven't done so already, scroll down, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, share it with your buddies, see what they think. And as always, don't forget, your best life is a 10-pin life. See ya.